Hello, beautiful humans. This is Leashia from Ethical Wellness Programs, and you are listening to the Heal in Motherhood podcast, the show that combines the science of the mind-body connection and trauma research, along with spiritual teachings and practical tools to help women heal their lives from the inside out and reclaim their inner goddess, while showing up as the person, parent, and partner they came here to be. If you like what you hear on today's show, please don't forget to leave us a review on the iTunes podcast app so that we can grow our community and impact as many women's lives as possible. Hello and welcome everybody. I'm excited today because I'm actually on the podcast today. So I've got Charlie on the podcast with me, and she is my new co-host. So you're going to be hearing a bit more from me and Charlie together. She's going to be interviewing me today on emotional wellness for mums. Then next month I will interview her on whatever it is, a topic. We'll bring you another topic, and then vice versa as we go through. So you'll be hearing a lot more of both of us together, which is super, super exciting. Yeah, Charlie, welcome. Come and tell us all about you.
Thank you so much, my darling. I'm super excited. So I guess my name is Charlie. I am a motherhood coach, I guess on a bit of a mission to change the way that we view and experience motherhood in a modern world. And in particular, really working and mentoring with mothers through the lens of matrescence. You know, in the same way that you work with it from, the healing perspective and trauma perspective, I work with it from matrescence. And I guess I've got what I call like the 5. What I'm most excited about this is like when you reached out to me, it was one of my key 5 C's as to how I think we're going to change the way that we view and experience motherhood. One of those 5 C's is collaboration. And so as soon as you mentioned it, I was like 100%, because that's, it's one of the ways that we get to really have these conversations, which is also one of my 5 C's, have these really important, beautiful conversations with other mothers, collaborate with each other, celebrate each other, work with each other as a team. We are on the same team. So I'm super excited to be here. And I'm actually more excited today because I get to shed light on you. You're going to be in the hot seat today, and we're going to get to learn a little bit more about you and your passion. And sometimes when you're always the host and the facilitator, like you have been, we don't get to dive deep into you and your offerings and your gifts. So it's actually a really beautiful opportunity to, celebrate you in today's episode. So I'm super excited.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, I love that. Yeah. I was definitely feeling the call to bring in some more mamas and collaborate with more women because it feels good. Like you say, we are all on the same team. So thank you for saying yes. And
Right.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it. So you're ready to be put on the hot seat today?
Yes.
Alrighty. So today we're going to focus on emotional wellness, which I know is something that you're so deeply passionate about, and this is your sort of zone of genius. So first of all, can you just talk to me a little bit about what is emotional wellness? Like, what does that actually mean? And also share a little bit about your personal journey with the concept of emotional wellness as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I would love to know. So I'm going to, because I'm the interview person, send a question back to you already. Sorry about that. When someone says emotional wellness to you, what's the first thing that kind of comes to mind?
I think for me, it is about, I guess, the way in which you care for yourself. Self-care practices come to mind for me. Emotional wellness in terms of mental health as well. I think about that, and that can obviously mean many different things. It can be multi-layered, multifaceted. But yeah, definitely for me, it's mental health and the ways in which I guess I would care for myself, and am I aware of what my self-care practices are that help me feel well all day, every day.
Yeah, beautiful. And I feel like a lot of people would probably see it in a similar light, and it definitely is. That is a part of it.
as well as what is our relationship to our emotions and how do we regulate our emotions. And I feel like this is something that's really kind of lost in terms of, we do talk about self-care a lot, and that is more the solution to the emotional wellness, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we do talk about mental health as well, which, is your depression and anxiety, postnatal depression, those kinds of things within motherhood. But when I'm talking about emotional wellness, I'm talking more about how we actually communicate with our emotions, how we respond, how we react to life, and how it feels inside our nervous system. Like, what is the felt sense within our body when we experience these emotions as well? And also coming up with the idea of everything starts from our emotions. So, for example, something happens, an event happens, then we have what we call a natural emotion about the event. So a natural response, a natural bodily response.
Yeah.
And then after that, what's created is our thoughts, the narrative, the stories around that. And then from that, more feelings can be created, more emotions and feelings, but what I more call feelings. Okay. So when I'm talking about emotions and feelings, and I don't want to go too deeply into this, but emotions is the energy in motion within the body, and a feeling is something a little bit different. So the feeling is created from a thought. And this is where the sort of term of, you've got to change your beliefs to change how you feel. But before that, there's that natural emotion from an event. So everything is created from there. And then it's the mindset stuff, and they create what we call the secondary emotions. Yeah. And if you want to hear more about secondary emotions, I talk about that in the Healing Mum Guilt episode. So you can head back to the Heal Mum Guilt episode, where I do go a lot deeper into what secondary emotions are. But a lot of the time, that's, the guilt and the shame and the anger covering up the sadness and the grief and those sort of more sensitive, harder emotions that we tend to not want to feel.
And I find that interesting. And I've heard that terminology before, that whole, emotions are energy in motion, which I think is such a beautiful description of that. And I'd be interested in your perspective on this in particular, I guess. So I heard recently that emotions, they only last in the body for like 90 seconds. But then what happens, it's the thought. It's the thought that keeps you stuck in that emotion. And like you were saying, that's because of, one day someone said to you and you felt this. So you then relate it to that story. And that then, it gives you an example of the last time I felt like this happened to me. And da, 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 da. So it's usually the story or the narrative that can keep us stuck in our emotions. Is that what you mean? Is that your sort of, like what is your thought? What do you say around that?
Yeah, exactly that. And you just really explained that beautifully, because that's exactly what happens. That is, we go from the event, someone called us a name and we felt this embarrassment or shame. Normally embarrassment is what comes. So we felt embarrassed because someone called us a name in the playground. And then we started to create the thoughts that, oh, maybe having curly hair isn't cool, or maybe I'm not a good person because, someone's called me this name. So therefore it means I'm not a good person. And then that creates more feelings and emotions around it, because then you feel shameful. So embarrassment then turns into shame, and I'm a bad person or I'm not good enough because of the initial event that's happened. It's not actually the emotion that's keeping us stuck. It is the stories that we create around the experience that we've had.
Yeah.
And the more we experience these things, the more embedded these beliefs, these patterned beliefs or these core beliefs become. The more we create more stories, the more we create more thoughts and feelings, and that becomes like a cycle. So that becomes more thoughts, more feelings, more thoughts, more feelings. And we're ignoring now that, oh, I felt embarrassed when that person called me XYZ. So we've come so far away from the original emotion that now we think that, you know, we've got anger coming up, we're feeling shameful, and we've started to create all these stories and beliefs about ourselves as well.
And you know what? I think Tony Robbins calls it the crazy eight, doesn't he? And like you go into this crazy eight and it's this perpetual cycle of, well, this is what I felt. And so this is what it means because that was my interpretation of that situation. And then I'm just giving myself more examples as to why I felt like that. And this is, you know, and it kind of goes into this crazy eight cycle. And I think from what you've just said there is ultimately then it can cause or it can result in what is a core belief. And I think what I've experienced, and probably yourself as well, when you've worked with women, is you can have a completely different experience and I guess this is where we get triggered, right? We can have a completely different experience, but it will catapult us back into time as to when we felt that way before and why we were not safe and all the rest of it. So we're linking the two experiences as one emotion, but they can be entirely different. Does that make sense? It's like, as an example, I had a woman that felt really triggered by COVID, for example. She couldn't go anywhere. She felt really, really triggered. And I was like, when was the last time that you felt unsafe? You know, because obviously COVID is going to bring up fear. When was the last time you felt unsafe? And she was like, well, I had breast cancer and I felt really, I felt really unsafe then. And so it was like a trigger that was also impacting an old experience, an old story, an old narrative, an old event. But the emotion was the same. So it kind of unraveled. It can be multi-layered, can't it? Is what I'm trying to say. Is that you can have a trigger or an experience, but it keeps coming back to that same core belief. Maybe if you felt shame or anger once, doesn't matter what the situation is, because the narrative and the story you've had that one time years ago creates that same emotional response in your body.
Yeah. And what I feel like this shows is that working with our core beliefs isn't enough. It has to be that one layer deeper of getting to that felt sense.
Yeah. So talk to me about why is it important, especially for us as mothers or as parents, to be aware of this language and this work around emotional wellness? How do we get to that field sense? Like, what would you do with a mother, for example?
Okay, yeah, awesome. Well, talking to your first question there, I feel like emotional wellness for parents is so important. And the reason for that is because, like we were talking about before, is you was talking about feeling triggered. And when we become parents, I don't know if this has been your experience as well, but our children trigger us, and they trigger us more than anyone else.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about emotional wellness, the reason for this is because they're reflecting back to us what we have not healed within ourselves. So our children are, and I say this all the time, they really are our greatest teachers and they're our greatest healers as well. A lot of people have this idea that maybe they need to heal before they become a parent, but actually it's a continuum. It's part of the parenting experience. And if we're not willing to look at this stuff and become aware of our own emotions and our felt sense, then we recreate within our children our own experience. So it becomes then a generational thing. they can then take on how we responded. We'll go back to the example of us being called a name in the playground as a kid, by our friends or who we thought were our friends or whatever. We've created that story is of deficiency, of I'm a bad person, I'm not good enough. Then your child comes to you and they've been called a name in the playground. How are you going to respond? You're going to respond from fear. You're not going to respond from a clear head, because you'll be taken straight back on a body sensation level without even you consciously knowing it. On an unconscious level, you're taken straight back to something that happened for you in your childhood and how you felt and how you responded and how maybe your family or your mother or your dad responded to that, which then perpetuated the cycle of, I'm not good enough, or I'm, feeling shameful.
Yeah.
Because we've never healed it.
And they say it's 7 generations back, isn't it? It's 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. So you are carrying 7 generations prior, the things that your mother hadn't quite healed and her mother hadn't quite healed and and like we carry that in our DNA. And so sometimes I think we carry, this emotional, like you say, this emotional heaviness. We carry emotions that are maybe not even ours, but it's funny because they can be presented to us. Sometimes, I don't know if you've had this experience. I know that I have, is that whole, why am I doing what I'm doing when I know what I know? It's like, why am I still reacting this way when I know what that's about, or, and it's like, it's a really bizarre thing because the body is communicating from a completely different place. Like you say, it's not about logic or knowing. It's like this response in the body, because every life experience is stored in the body, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I love that you bring that up, because it is so true. And that's kind of when people come to me, right? Because they've read a parenting book, or, I've even had people that are care facilitators, they've done training, they've been to college, they've got the degree. They know child development. They know how the brain is changing when they're a child. And they know that, the child is acting childish because they're a child and they're meant to act childish. They know all the things, but still they can't stop reacting to their children's behavior that really annoys them. Like maybe their child really be really silly in their face and they find that super frustrating and annoying, and then they explode at their child. And it's like we know it in the logic and reason, in what we call the conscious mind, but in the unconscious, on a body level, we're still operating from this state of fear. We're still in the fight, flight, freeze response within the nervous system. We're not responding from a place of calm and peace because of all of our emotional baggage. So when we're responding in fear, when we're in anger, or, we're in rage, or we're responding from anxiety or fear or whatever it is, that is a really, really good indication that we're responding from an emotional event, a previous emotional event. We're not responding from our wise adult self. We're responding from our little child within us.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Like that inner child doesn't ever go anywhere. They're always there. And, they say that you're practically a genius between the ages of 0 to 7 in terms of how much we're working, how much we're developing, and all of your patterns and your programs and everything are being downloaded at that time, And so even though as an adult we think we know better, we forget sometimes that response is from that little girl within us that maybe wasn't quite seen, heard, held, supported, or whatever, right?
Yeah. And we all have this. We all have inner child wounds, no matter how wonderful your childhood was. We don't just have these wounds from our parents. It can be other caregivers. It can be school children. It can be teachers. It can be one little comment that made you feel insecure that you've held on to for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Oh, your sister's eaten all her dinner and you haven't eaten all your dinner, so you're not getting a dessert. We think that is a normal thing to say to a child, but for them, that could be a traumatic event.
Yeah.
That could be an experience that it's funny, right? Because I have women that come in and they've had, they've had a lot of trauma, but they'll remember one experience of, for example, one of my clients remembered that she made her dad a cup of coffee and it was hot and she dropped it. He responded in his rage, oh my God, whatever, idiot, or da-da-da-da. And she has held on to that for years. And, all these other things have happened in her life. But it was that one thing when she dropped his hot coffee all over the floor that was an experience she was holding on to that she completely forgotten about.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we went back into the body and asked the body and went with the felt experience and got the body to tell us what the story was.
Yeah.
Until that came forward as a memory. And then we, helped her move through that and heal that.
Yeah.
But these things can get stuck in the body. And most of us aren't taught growing up how to respond to our emotions. And this is the biggest thing with my work, is that growing up, I was never taught about emotions. And for all of my, up until I was 30, the way I used to respond to emotional overwhelm was with dissociation. So I have been very dissociated, and that means you numb. You're not there. You look calm and you look like you're dealing with it. Everyone would be like, oh, Leashia, you're so strong, you're so calm, you're so this, you're so that. Underneath the surface, I was like the duck, with the legs underneath the surface, like trying to keep my head up above water.
Yeah.
Because on the inside, I had all of this stuff and I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to process it. And then it started to show up as physical symptoms. Once I had the kids, it started to show up as physical symptoms, chronic pain, digestive issues, weight gain. Even before that, I'd always have shoulder pain or neck pain or whatever it was. So this emotional baggage that I'd been carrying for so long, exhaustion, I was always fatigued. I'd always have a nap in the middle of the day. That was one of my biggest things. I always believed I was low energy person.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not a low energy person. I just had so much emotional baggage that I was carrying around this massive backpack of rocks on my back.
Yeah.
And once I started to take those rocks out of my backpack, each emotional event, it got lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. And anyone who's done the inner work will know you have this sense of lightness. After a session, I ask, oh, how are you feeling now? And they're like, I just feel light. I feel lighter.
Yeah.
And it literally is that. And for me, learning about the nervous system and my relationship to my emotions has been the biggest game changer for me, especially within parenting, because so many things don't trigger me anymore. I don't feel the need to be in rage and anger. I've integrated anger. I know how to now healthily express my anger. Anger's not wrong. We're told anger's wrong. Anger's not wrong.
And that's a beautiful thing you said at the beginning about your relationship with emotions, because we are so quick to label, aren't we? Anger's wrong. And, even with our kids, we get triggered by the kids that are fully expressing their anger because we've been told that anger is wrong. So we're like, what?
So we're trying to stop them.
And that relationship with our emotions and where that's come from. And I love what you said there about, that real physical representation of symptoms in your body. And that's why I really love Gabor Mate's work, because he talks about that. He can literally look at someone's life experiences and then look at mixture of diagnosis and literally pair them. He'd be like, well, that's the woman that's got breast cancer because this is what's happened in her life. That's the woman that's got that, and how it manifests in that real physical sense. So just talk to me. I know that you want this to be quite, a short episode because we want to get as many beautiful nuggets of wisdom while we're here, if you can talk to me a little bit about what that looks like.
Mm,
When you say, when you're working with clients and you do the healing, because I've done similar healing in a completely different way to you. So
mm.
when you say sort of get to that root cause of what that emotion was in the body, let the body respond, what does that look like? What does that mean? What is that process?
Right, okay. Yeah. So you're looking more sort of for the how. And I just want to touch on this quickly before we sort of move forward. One thing I really want to say, which I feel is really important, is if we can accept all of our emotions, if we can be comfortable in all of our stuff, we allow that space for our children. And for me, there is no better gift than being able to sit with and be with and hold safe space for my daughter to fully express whatever it is she needs to feel. Because what we've done for too long is shut down, distract, give her a sweet. It's okay, I'll buy you an ice cream. No, let your child feel her emotions or his emotions. But if you're uncomfortable with them, then you're the one who needs to do the work, not them, you know?
And I love that. And I think that's such a beautiful reminder, because we're going to say, why is this work? And we mentioned it before. Why is it so important for us to consider this work for ourselves as parents? And you've just nailed it there, because it allows you to provide safe space for our children to process it all. So we're not passing on those generational, patterns again about how we manage our emotions. And I think I've seen that with my kids, and like you said, the ways that I've been triggered by them and their emotions, and why I'm triggered is because that was not safe for me to explore and express, or XYZ. So yeah, I love the way that you've just worded that. I think
Yeah,
it's really beautiful that you've touched on that.
yeah.
And so talk me through a little bit about the process, as a mother now, going from your experience of trauma and, the ways that you felt it in your body as emotions. How do you now, regulate yourself in the moment and hold that safe space for your child at the same time or as well?
Well, if you want to get started with, learning how to emotionally regulate yourself today, that really starts with being able to identify an emotion. And then it's learning how to manage our internal response to that emotion. So that really is the second part. So the first part really is identifying what it is you're feeling, because most people are so disembodied that they don't recognize when they're starting to feel angry. They don't recognize when they're starting to feel an emotion in their body. We go straight from 0 to 100 because a lot of us aren't aware. So the first step is really starting to learn the language of our emotions. And I'm going to, if you're on my email list, you'll receive this in an email. If you're not on my email list, then jump in the show notes and I'll put a link there. But I've got this beautiful emotions wheel, and it's got loads of different words you can use for your emotions and your feelings. And most of us don't have a very big vocabulary when it comes to emotions, right? We know happy, we know sad, we know anger, we know embarrassment, and, we can even go into anxiety and maybe depression as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of us don't have a very vast vocabulary. The better you can get at explaining what it is you're feeling in that moment, the easier this will be.
Yeah.
So really the first step is learning some language for your emotions, so that emotions will, and then starting to notice when you're feeling something. So notice the sensations in the body. How does anger feel in the body? How does rage feel in the body? How does it feel different to anger? What are your thoughts and feelings about it when you experience it in the body? Are you tipping into overwhelm? Does it feel comfortable? Does it feel light? Is it tingly? Is it heavy? It's them sensation words. And also getting really good at labeling your emotions, because There's some work by Dan Siegel, and he talks about flipping your lid. And he talks about how labeling our emotions helps us come out of that unrational, unconscious mind, which is what we've talked about, the natural response, that natural knee-jerk reaction. And it brings you back into your conscious, logical mind. So it brings you back into where you've actually got to think, okay, I notice I'm feeling triggered. I'm feeling sad, actually, or I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling anxious, or whatever it is. So really starting to get good at labeling what it is you're feeling, and always lead with that as well. You know, it helps you get better at communication as well, because you can start to go, instead of saying, you made me feel you can just say, because then we're going into blame and shame, and we're using toxic language. We can own our shit, right? This is all about self-responsibility. And that's really where it starts, is being able to say, I feel really anxious, or mummy feels really anxious when you jump off of there. Can you not jump off of the sofa, please? It's making mummy feel really anxious. You're not blaming, you're not calling him naughty, you're not shaming him for jumping off the sofa for the 100th time. You're just explaining how you feel. That helps them also build that empathy within their system, because they're seeing, oh, mummy feels anxious. And you can even talk to them about the sensations in the body and all those sorts of things. But first, focus on you. Don't worry about your children. Focus on you. And once we've done that, another part of this is learning to what your safety response is. And this is a little bit deeper, and this is something that I teach in my programs. But a lot of us don't feel safe in our system. And when we tip into this fight, flight, freeze mode, our nervous system thinks there's an emergency and it's unsafe to be here in this moment. It is doing anything it can to try and get you out of that. So you'll either go into fight mode, which would be you're angry, you know, the pointing the fingers. You might feel like you need to run away. So you might, I can't do this, and you might leave the room. And then the freeze mode is what I used to go into, which is the dissociation. And even though I could sit and say a calm word, in my nervous system, it was going crazy. And it's important to know that you can't fake nervous system regulation. So if you're feeling that, your child is also going to know that what's coming out of your mouth is BS. It's really important that we do learn about the nervous system, and it's something that I teach, and I'm really passionate about teaching about, because this is where it all really starts. You know, we can say all the things and say all the right things. Oh, I'm feeling XYZ and I'm da-da-da-da-da. And we can explain ourselves. But if we're not actually feeling that on a sensation body level, our children will pick up on that, you know. Creating that safety within our own system is like the number one priority.
I think that's probably going to be a whole other episode around the nervous system and, you know, self-regulation, because it's such a huge topic. And there's a lot of people that really don't understand it and, you know, the impact it has. So I love that. And I think that 100% that's another conversation for us to have and for you to dive deeper into, because I think people will find such huge value diving deeper into that area as well. And I love what you said before as well about, you know, self-responsibility. It's so powerful. And we do naturally, we point the blame and we allow that, you know, it becomes external instead of that real internal reflection that you were talking about. You know, what is this I'm feeling? How does it feel? Why am I feeling like that? That's such a beautiful process. We like to bypass that bit and we just go straight to the blame. And I think Brené Brown talks about that as well really beautifully.
Well, just to point out there, that blame, when we go into blame, you're speaking from your inner child. You're blaming and pointing fingers. You've gone into being, you're reacting from your child self. And when we take responsibility for ourselves and our own stuff and our own emotions, and we show up and we say, I feel XYZ, we are then in our wise adult self. We are taking responsibility. Because remember, our kids can't take responsibility and they do blame because they don't know anything else and they haven't got the brain development there yet, especially if you've got toddlers, 0 to 7. They can't rationalize.
No.
They're not logical thinkers. They are emotional beings. They don't have that part of their brain developed yet.
Yeah.
That is where most of our trauma is, right? Is because we don't actually have that logical, we make everything about us when we're that age because we don't have the brain development yet. So I just wanted to sort of point that out. But yeah, I could talk about this for ages. So please reel me in, baby.
I know, right? But I love it. And I think you've really articulated all of that so beautifully. And one thing that I have had to do, just touching on that for a minute, is as my adult self now, I sometimes have to have that conversation with my inner child and be like, you know what, Charlie? You're all good. You're safe now. I'm an adult and I'm here to protect you, the inner child, so that I can then move forward. Because sometimes, I almost have that conversation with myself, my now adult self.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's something I teach in my programs for people to do is, you have got those two parts and you can go in and now you are an adult, right? And you do have the brain development.
Yeah.
You can go in and give that inner child what she didn't receive in that moment when that experience happened.
Yeah.
And we do that as a process within, my programs and stuff as well.
So powerful.
It really is.
So let's begin to sort of draw it in. I know that you are working on something super special at the moment. So you're putting together a book, a beautiful resource. Would you like to just have a little chat about what that is and the ways that it can add more support to our beautiful community?
Yes, awesome. So I am in the process of creating a book, How to Stop Losing It with Your Kids. And it's going to be a nervous system guide to peaceful parenting, basically. And so there'll be a lot of information in there and also guides and, things that you can do to start on your healing journey as well. So that's a bit about the book. And if you are in Perth, I'm doing a beautiful end of year event with 3 of my other gorgeous lady friends. And it's going to be an evening all for women, and we are letting go of 2022 and we are inviting in what it is we want to create for 2023. So there's going to be cacao, we're going to do a releasing journey, like embodiment journey. We're going to disconnect from the matrix, from the grids. We're going to do a chakra dance. We're going to do some ecstatic dance. And my partner, Stephen, is DJing. And then we're going to finish with some breath work and some journaling. So if that resonates and you want a more gentler way, instead of going out on New Year's Eve and getting pissed out of your face and feeling like shit, if you want a more gentle and nourishing way to bring in 2023, then it's on the 30th of December, February 30th, December. Please come along and I will put the link for the tickets in the show notes as well. So yeah.
Well, that just sounds divine. I couldn't actually think of a better way. I'm like you. I would all day, every day choose to do something like that before the end of the year. I don't drink, so there's no way I'm going to start day one of the new year feeling hungover and shitty. Like, you create the change now that you want to see in the future. I love that. It's beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I'm super grateful that you have given me the opportunity to have this conversation. You know what? It's so beautiful to witness and listen to you. And I can see, obviously, because we're on Zoom, I see your eyes light up. And when you're talking about stuff you're passionate, like you really lean forward into the camera as well. Like I can feel and see that this is like every part of you is like fully here and fully engaged. And I just want to take a moment to really celebrate you for that and honor that. And it's really important work, as someone that, as we all do, as someone that has trauma, as someone that is still triggered, as someone that still struggles to regulate my nervous system, as a parent, it's so powerful to do this work and to do it with somebody that, holds such beautiful space like you do and, is really interested in creating that massive impact. So thank you for the beautiful work that you do and for the beautiful soul that you are. I feel very privileged that our paths have crossed. And it's an honor. It's an honor to be with you.
Awesome. Oh, thank you. I love you.
I love you.
And yes, I feel very grateful to have magically met you. Yeah, thank you for asking me questions and being here and saying yes to this adventure and opportunity. And yeah, we're going to wrap everything up now. So thank you for being here with us today. And if you, as listeners, have got any feedback or questions, please drop them in our DMs, and we'll see you all next week. Namaste.